Thanks, Louisa. Good morning, everyone who's in the room and online. It's great to have so many people attending this session with us today. So I am going to spend the next 3 hours telling you all about the legal updates. I'm joking. It's not going to be 3 hours, don't worry. Johnny's given me some time, but he's not given me 3 hours. But I just wanted to kind of give you a picture of all of the legislative things that are happening in the retirement fund space. So part of my job and my team's job is obviously to monitor through industry bodies and with the regulators, and we keep an eye out and we scan the environment for all the legislative changes. And then we pick out and we feed through to Louisa's team what we think is relevant for them. And we tell them as soon as it's a draft, so we can work together, give input back into the regulators, and try and make sure that legislation is actually fit for purpose. We're kind of ahead of the curve all of the time, so we know what's coming down the pipeline. And when Johnny speaks, you'll see how some of the changes and efficiencies we put into our digital processes are for legislative changes. A lot are to make the user experience better and easier and quicker and more efficient, but some of them are to keep up with legislative changes. So you can see here, I put on the slide, I mean, the stuff that's coming out of the regulators at the moment is crazy in terms of the volume, not the content. What they've started doing is issuing what are called standards. And these standards are a type of law, so we have to follow them. It's not like optional, it's not best practice. These are our law. We always get tax changes every year. There's a lot of stuff happening on the investment side, whether it's ESG or infrastructure. And one of the things is every time they change the legislation, now there's reporting impacts. So that reporting team is always having to keep up to date with all of the new reporting requirements that the regulator puts into place. I'm sure all of you have heard of PAPIA, and I think we kind of got that down pat now and embedded. So, but I'm going to focus on 3 legislative issues this morning, just to kind of highlight what we think are key things we want you to be aware of. So the first one is nomination of beneficiary forms. So hopefully a lot of you are aware of nomination of beneficiary forms for the fund. The fund, when somebody dies, will pay out the fund credit. And some of the employers, the participating employers, also have an insured benefit through the fund. A multiple of fund salary. It's 2 times salary, 3 times salary. And that benefit is paid out in terms of Section 37C. So, the trustees have to look for the nominees and the dependents, but the beneficiary form is very important. And it is helpful, but it's a guide to the trustees in deciding how to allocate a fund benefit. What I'm talking about now is not the fund benefits. These are the policies that are not fund owned. These are employer policies. A typical example is your funeral benefits. So those fall outside of the fund. It's a policy that is in the name of the employer. And you also get death benefits. So the death policy is actually in the name of the employer. It's not the fund. It's not paid out in terms of 37C. So if your participating employer has either of those benefits, a funeral benefit or a death benefit that's owned by the employer, it's very important that you listen to this section. So in the past, the insurance law said that the employer could decide how to pay those monies out. So if one of your colleagues died, the insurer would say to the employer, where do you want us to pay the money? Who do you want us to pay it to? And usually, it would be paid to a spouse, or it would often actually follow what the fund did. But in essence, it was an employer discretion as to how it got paid. That has changed. And we were given a 2-year period to transition to this new process that we have in place. And the new process is that the insurer has to pay out in accordance with the nomination of beneficiary fund. They have to follow the nomination form, and it has to be a separate form for the funeral policy and for the death policy. And if there is no nomination form, it gets paid to the estate. So let's think of this scenario. If you have a funeral benefit and there is no nomination form saying please pay it to myself or, you know, my wife or whatever the case is, it will be paid into the estate. Now, all of you know how quickly funerals happen and how quickly you need to pay those expenses. That money being paid into the estate is very unhelpful. And it is not good for the families at all. The same with the death claim, that if there is no nomination form specifically for that policy, then it's going to get paid into the estate. So really, it's our plea to you today is, because we have been sending out communication, our plea to you today is please encourage your colleagues and your fellow employees to fill out a nomination form for every single policy. And to look after them safely. So when we need them, when we need to process those claims, that we have a nomination form for the funeral policy, for the fund, and for the death policy that's owned by the employer. So that's our one big plea to you, because it has a real practical and a prejudicial implication if we don't have those nomination forms in place. It is something we engaged with the regulators for a long time on, saying this is not consumer friendly. It is a problem to get those nomination forms, but unfortunately the law is what the law is. And so if we don't get those nomination forms, then the default is the deceased estate. The other thing is just a point is that obviously when family situations change, you know, you get married, you get divorced, you have a new baby, and those nomination forms need to be kept up to date. So that's another challenge. You know, often we get nomination forms that have been filled out, you know, pre an entire family. So that is a challenge as well. So unfortunately, it's something that we have to keep reminding people about. And so if you can take that back to your colleagues, we'd really appreciate that. And it will make all of our lives, and especially the members and their families' lives, much easier in the event of needing to claim. All right. Now I'm moving on to the two-pot system, which in fact should be called the three-pot system. And I'm going to explain to you why. Have any of you heard of the two-pot system? And you might have read about it in the press. And really the background to this is it came up during COVID, where people were employed, but maybe their salary had to reduce because, for example, the place of work had to close during lockdown, or they got reduced pay. And people were saying, or their spouse, partner, who was employed got retrenched. And so people were struggling financially. And so they approached their funds and said, please, can we have access to some of our retirement funding? We need access to that money. But they hadn't left service. I mean, as you know, you can only access your retirement savings if you leave service, if you die, or you retire. But people were wanting money even though they hadn't left employment. So park that. That was the one thing that people just had, you know, and it's a problem in South Africa that people have no emergency savings. There's no savings pot, you know, there's no savings account that you can go and access extra money if you have financial hardship, or if you have some kind of, you know, your car breaks down and needs to be fixed, or you have a medical emergency that's not covered by my medical aid. So that was the one thing, and park that in terms of kind of that need to access money. The other problem we have in this country is that often when people get to retirement, they don't have enough money to retire on and support themselves for the rest of their retirement until they pass away. So we have this dual problem that people don't save enough money for retirement, but they also don't have access to money when there's an emergency. Now, the reason why people don't have the main reason why people don't have enough money when they retire is that every time somebody changes their job, they can access all of their fund money and they don't save it. So if you change job 5 times in your career or in your life, that's 5 times, you know, people are taking out all of their money in the fund and not saving it or preserving it, and they spend it. So by the time you get to retirement, you don't have enough money to retire comfortably. So we have these two issues: not enough money while you're working and not enough money in retirement. So what government has come up with is this, what they call the two-pot system. And I'll explain a little bit more about what these two pots are. They issued a draft law legislation last year, and there was mega amounts of comment on it, a lot of feedback to them, and we're waiting for the second draft. The second draft we should get in June this year, and we'll be able to see it and see if our comments have been taken into account. But the thing you need to remember is that they're saying this is going to be effective on 1 March next year. So we're already in the countdown towards the transition period for 2 pots, and we haven't seen the legislation. So we are quite anxious about that because there's a lot of work we need to do to get ready for it. And it's difficult to get completely ready without having the final legislation. It will apply to the AF Access Fund. It will apply to all types of funds, whether it's a retirement annuity fund or a preservation fund, whether you're a defined contribution fund or a defined benefit fund, just in case some of you have more than one fund, but it will apply to the AF Access Fund. So what they've come up with is this 2-pot situation, which balances both of those problems that I spoke about people staying in employment and needing access to some money, and people not preserving and keeping all of their money into retirement. And so the 2 pots, one pot is called the savings pot or the access pot, and you will be able to take money out of it whenever you want. Well, not whenever you want, I'll tell you when now, but you will be able to access that money in that pot without leaving employment, which is great because we know people sometimes resign to get access to that money. So you will be able to access the savings pot without resigning. And then the retirement pot, you won't be able to touch at all, even if you change jobs, until you retire. So the one will be the emergency savings without leaving your job, and the other will keep growing and growing and growing until you retire. And so this is the plan to meet both of those needs. So let me tell you about how these 2 pots will work. Bear in mind, this is what will happen from the 1st of March next year. So from the 1st of March next year, everybody will, on the system, it's not real pots, but everyone on our administration system will have 2 pots. And when you start paying your contribution from March next year, we'll put 1/3 of your contribution into the savings pot and 2/3 into the retirement pot. Your savings pot, as I said, 1/3 of your contribution every month will go into that pot. You can take a withdrawal from that pot once a year. So it's not like an ATM. You can't go like every month and say, you know, I just want to withdraw some money. Only once a year. And you have to have a minimum of 2,000. Again, you know, you can't go out and like withdraw 100 rands, 150 rands, 200 rands. You have to have a minimum of 2,000 rands in that pot to take it out. If somebody takes out some money out of their savings pot, it will be taxed at their marginal rate. So the tax tables that apply to withdrawal benefits do not apply. So we'll have to apply for a tax directive, and it will be taxed at your marginal rate. And then if you don't have to take your money out your savings pot. I mean, we're obviously as you know, kind of from a responsibility point of view, I mean, we understand that people may need to access for an emergency. Black Friday is not an emergency, even if the sale is really good. But, you know, there will be people who unfortunately do kind of wait until it's 2,000 and then try and access it. But it is meant to be for emergencies or financial hardship. So that is your savings pot. The current plan is that, so there was a lot of, if you are putting in, let's say, 150 rands into your retirement fund every month, and so 1/3 of that being 50 rands, so 50 rands went into your savings pot, it would take you quite a while to get up to 2,000 rands. So there was a lot of, you know, discussion around what they call seeding capital. So putting some money into your savings pot on the 1st of March next year from your fund credit. So people do have have some money in there. So the current proposals from National Treasury is that you will have, they call it seeding capital. So it's basically like you'll have an opening balance in your savings account, savings pot on the 1st of March. That amount that will be put into your savings pot on the 1st of March will be 10% of your fund credit to a maximum of 25,000. Okay, so if you have somebody who's been in your fund for like 40 years and has 2 million rands in their fund credit, they're going to be subject to the maximum of 25,000 rands. Okay, so everybody, as long as you will be able to put 10% subject to a maximum of 25,000 rands into your savings pot once off on the 1st of March next year. If you decide to access it, then it's going to take another year before you're able to access it again. But going forward, each month, 1/3 of your contributions will go into the savings pot. The savings pot, as I said, you can access it any time. You don't need to resign to access it. You can come to the fund or the administrator and say, I want to take my annual, I want to take out a withdrawal from my savings pot. Johnny will talk about how we propose and think about the process we'll follow from an admin point of view of accessing that money. So that's your savings pot, that you can access at any time, and the 1/3 contribution goes into it. Then we move to the retirement pot. So the balance, the 2/3 of your contributions go into the retirement pot. You will not be able to touch that money until you reach retirement. You can change jobs, you can do whatever, you will not be able to access it. So the 2/3 will keep going into that pot. If you change jobs, you can move that pot with you to your new employer fund, and then continue to put the 2/3 into it. And when you retire, that will have to be used to purchase an annuity. So the full amount can't be taken as a lump sum, regardless of whether you're in a pension fund or a provident fund. So that you will have to use to purchase an annuity. Obviously, that then meets the need for people to have this pot of money that they cannot touch until retirement, so they have enough money when they reach retirement. So that is how the two pots will work, and that's from the 1st of March. So some of you may be asking, where is the 3rd pot and what happens to my fund credit in the fund now? So there is a 3rd pot, and the 3rd pot is what they call your vested pot. And in essence, it's your fund credit on the 29th of February next year. So it's the amount of money you have in your fund credit the day before the 2-pot system comes in. So that's the 3rd pot, your vested pot. And the rules that apply now to that vested pot, you know, when you leave your job, you can access it. When you retire, you can, use it for a retirement benefit. The rules for that vested pot will remain the same as they apply currently. So those rules say that you can access your vested pot on resignation. You will still be able to access that vested pot on resignation. So they're not changing what they call your current rights to your money are not changing. That's why it's called vested. So it's protected in accordance with the current rules for retirement funding, and the savings pot and the retirement pot will only apply to your contributions from the 1st of March. Are there any questions on that so far? Shall I finish? I'll finish the 2-pot, and then we normally have lots and lots of questions on that. So if you resigned, let's say in 3 years' time, let me give you an example. So you resign in 3 years' time. What will you get out of the fund? You will get your vested pot because the same rules apply to it. You will, if you have not taken your one withdrawal from your savings pot in that year, you can take one withdrawal and you could take it all out. But you can only take one withdrawal a year. So if you've taken a withdrawal the month before you resign, you've got to wait another 11 months before you can access it because the rules apply. You're only allowed one withdrawal a year. And your retirement pot, you won't be able to touch at all on resignation. You'll only be able to touch it on retirement. So vested pot on resignation you can take, savings pot, one withdrawal in the 12 months, and your retirement pot only on retirement. So you can imagine, communicating this is going to be very interesting, and benefit statements are going to be quite lengthy now. So there's a few issues that still need to be resolved. Well, first of all, we haven't got the final legislation. So what I'm telling you about today are the principles of it, and how we think it will roll out. So one of the things is the date, the effective date. I've said 1 March 2024. National Treasury, in every interaction we've had with them over the last 2 months, have kept saying it's 1 March 2024. And we're saying, I mean, it's not just Alexforbes, it's the industry as a whole are saying, you know, we need more time to get ready to implement something that's complicated. Bear in mind, remember what I said about the savings pot you took out, if you can take one withdrawal and it gets taxed at your marginal rate. SARS needs to be geared up for this as well. So it's not just Alexforbes and all the other administrators and all the funds, because every fund's set of funds rules will need to be amended as well. And that means the FSCA has to approve every set of rules. So it's not just us, it's the SARS and FSCA need to be ready as well. One of the concerns raised was on retrenchment. What happens on retrenchment? You know, because retrenchment is seen as a no-fault type of thing, and so there has been some calls that people should be able to access some of their retirement pot on retrenchment. So let's wait. We still need to see what happens with that. Bear in mind, they still will be able to access their vested pot. It's just their retirement pot that cannot be accessed. I've spoken about the seed capital, so that amount of money that will move from your fund credit on the 29th of February to your kind of the opening balance for your savings pot on the 1st of March. The 2,000 rands, we've been told that will be the minimum. This is going to be the other little complication, as if it wasn't complicated enough, is that they are saying that for people who are 55 years and older, on the 1st of March 2021, not this year or last year, 2021, will be able to decide opt in or out of the two-pot system. So we're going to have a mechanism of asking all of them what they want, and presumably having a default that if they don't make a choice, then we decide which way they will go. Defined benefit fund doesn't impact on access. And then there's other things we need to think about. So for example, if somebody gets a housing loan or we need to process a divorce order or a maintenance order, which of the pots do we take it from? You know, and so that's some of the complications. So we've had discussions with National Treasury and the FSCA about it, because these changes that I've spoken about don't just need changes to the Income Tax Act, there also needs to be changes to the Pension Funds Act and the Divorce Act. So it's quite complicated from a legislative point of view. Changing legislation is not a quick or an easy process. There's public consultations. It obviously has to go through Parliament and be passed into law. So we are a little bit concerned about the lead time to implement all of this, especially from our point of view, where kind of all the detail obviously needs to be ironed out. But those are the principles of it. Should we go to questions now before we do the Menti?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Okay, just some questions online. Will the 25,000 seeding capital automatically be transferred to the savings pot, or do I have to elect to transfer it?
So the way that this wasn't in the first draft of the legislation. So the 25,000 rand is based on discussions that we've had with National Treasury. So again, that's something that we would need to see the detail. I suspect it will happen automatically. That we will, if somebody has, I mean, some people will have less than 25,000, that it will move automatically into your savings pot. If you don't want to keep money in your savings pot, you don't have to, well, first of all, you don't have to withdraw it. It's not, you know, compulsory. It's not a use it or lose it. You'll have to wait till the following year and then you can access it. Or, you know, just you've got to have a 12-month period between accessing it, or you can even transfer it to your retirement pot if you want, if you decide you don't want to touch it.
Thank you. Will the investment strategy be changed on having two streams to invest compared to the one before?
So that is a very good question. And that is, I mean, that's obviously a trustee decision. It's not an administrator decision or an employer decision. So the trustees would have to look at it as to whether you put the savings pot money into something that's more liquid, And then because the retirement pot, people will not be accessing to retirement. You can really look at long-term investments for that. So I suspect bigger funds will look at that by having a different investment strategy for that. And obviously we're doing calculations on, making assumptions as to how much will need to be paid out, particularly in the first year, that will be need to paid out. It probably will kind of lessen and calm down over time, because then it's going to take you a while to build up to the 2,000 rands again.
Thank you. On the retirement pot portion, would members get access if they were to immigrate?
Yes, they will. Again, we haven't seen the detail yet, but our understanding is they will, but only 3 years after they immigrate.
Thanks.
So, was somebody horrified by what I just said? Our understanding is that you would be able to access your savings pot immediately, but the retirement pot you would not be able to access.
Maybe we'll take 2 more questions online and see if there's some in the room, and then we'll just answer the rest on the chat.
Okay.
Can one put cash lump sums into the saving pot above the 25,000?
So that depends on your fund rules. So, for example, if you want to make additional voluntary contributions into the fund, you can make additional voluntary contributions, but those will be added to your normal contributions, and the split 1/3, 2/3 will apply. So it won't all go into your savings pot. It will be split 1/3, 2/3, and 2/3 will go into your retirement pot.
Thank you. Does the small withdrawals count towards the 550,000 tax-free?
No. Sorry, did I sound a bit blunt? No, it won't.
Thanks, Fiona.
Okay. If you take the savings, if you take the vested, if you resign and take your vested amount on resignation, that would go towards that tax-free lump sum. But the savings pot, remember, is taxed at your marginal rate. And there's a question in the room. Do we need a microphone? Or I'll repeat your question so everyone can hear.
On the two-pot system and also how the financial industry works in the as well as
That is a really interesting question for me. So first of all, in terms of the education on the two-pot, I think we did, as the funds did issue some preliminary information, very high level last year, to the funds and to the members. We are waiting for the next version before we start a full-on communication. I should have said we are running a group-wide project on two-pot at the moment. And we're trying to prepare as much as we can, whether it's from a communication, a legal, a system, and administration. We're trying to prepare as much as we can based on the detail we have at the moment. And part of that very much is a communication plan. One of the challenges we have with communication is that, and I see this, I'm a trustee of the AFRF, and I see the communication we issue, and you can monitor how many people actually look at the communication and how many open it and how long they open it for, because it kind of gives you an indication of whether people are reading it. And we have a real challenge with people not reading the communication we issue. So it's a really difficult question to answer, because sometimes the communication is out there, and people don't actually, engage with that communication. Johnny will speak more about, the member portals that we have where people can access information. But it is something that we are very conscious about and is very important to us, that financial education. And we just have to keep trying. We have to keep trying different methods. We have to, try and put it across in plain language, because these are complicated concepts. And I think, and there's a human reaction, is that not many people, what they say, they think about today. you know, that you don't engage with your future selves. And I think, I mean, and it's a whole generational thing. And we have all these people who look at all that kind of stuff. You know, we're constantly looking at new, better, more effective ways of communicating with members, because different people want to be communicated with in different ways. So it happens, and it's just constantly, we just need to keep, you know, reiterating that message and trying different channels. All right. Shall we do the Mentimeter?
So get your phones handy. Again, what you can do is either scan the QR code or go to www.menti.com and just enter the code for this specific Menti. Code is 113031110. When I go to the slide, that code will remain at the top of the slide if you haven't got the code yet, okay? But it's menti.com, then you enter the code, or you can scan the QR code. Interesting. What we will do, sorry, any questions that we couldn't answer now in the session, sorry, we're moving on for the sake of time, but what we will do is either answer the question in the chat or when we send you a copy of the presentation, we will also include all the Q&A from the chat in that email that we'll send out to you, so that you have got the question and the answer to all the questions, okay? We'll also, in the pack, when we distribute the pack, just give you these stats in terms of what the answers were to the different questions. So you've got the insights as well. Okay. Thank you very much. So it looks like roughly just under 75% of people believe that the two-pot system will result in better outcomes for members. Interesting. Time will tell. I suppose it will have a good impact in the long term in terms of retirement savings. It should start addressing some of the socioeconomic problems we got. But it's going to be interesting from an admin perspective to see those withdrawals and manage those withdrawals. So it's probably the administrators who said strongly disagree and disagree.